As we get into a game preview for this Houston Texans game on Sunday, presented by Simply IOA. First thing to pay attention to is 20 over 40. Minshew has won one game where he has had 20 or fewer attempts passing. He has lost 3 games when he has had over 40 attempts passing. Now, we're not great at math here, but that seems like a simple equation. So we'll see if the Jaguars are going to run the ball more this week and what's in store for quarterback Gardner Minshew. All right, big thing too is do your job. You have to have discipline for your assignments when you are rushing and trying to cover a guy like Deshaun Watson. Everyone has really harped on doing your job this week, sticking to your gaps, sticking to your assignments, not trying to do anything crazy on the defense against a guy like Deshaun Watson. And finally, big thing 3 is win the turnover ratio. Give Minshew and company an extra possession or 2. Give them the ball back. Create some turnovers, create some pressure, get some sacks. Is this the week that we see something exciting happen like that? We're going to talk about that and all that and more. Let's go back up to big thing 1, which is 20 over 40. Brian Sexton, you've been harping on this all week. It's something that you have found. What do you think with Gardner Minshew? Maybe how many pass attempts will we see this week?
Well, you remember we used to talk about a formula for Blake Bortles, what he could do well and how you could tailor things. And Jay Gruden even alluded to this a couple weeks ago about calling the right plays, putting him in the right positions. Gardner Minshew is incredibly effective with play action, rolling out of the pocket, looking at his options down the field. You've got to be able to run the ball. The Texans have not had great success stopping the run this year, so the Jaguars have to be able to establish the run so that you're only asking Gardner to throw 20 to 30, right? 25 is the sweet spot for him. 25 pass attempts gives him the chance. It means that he is able to play his style of game. If you ask a 6-foot quarterback to stand in the pocket and deal with the height of a J.J. Watt and those long arms and throw the ball 47 times, the odds just aren't in your favor. Put the game plan together with the run so that Gardner can do what Gardner does best. Throw the ball 25 times, not 45.
And John, I thought it was interesting. Gardner Minshew's post-game press conference, he was asked all about, what's going on in Houston right now, a new head coach, an 0-4 team. He's like, honestly, we don't have the liberty of worrying about someone else right now. And he used a curse word, so I can't say it. He said, we got to get our ish here together before we start looking at every other team.
Yeah, and he's right. When you're 1-3 and when you've struggled the way the Jaguars have in different areas the last few weeks, you need to worry about yourself more than what's going on in Houston. To Brian's point about the running game, and we've talked about reducing Minshew's throws. They want to do that. They've won it. It's not like they've forgotten or aren't aware of Brian's stat. Brian's really good, but they also know that. The problem is when you're trailing and when they've trailed early, and then all of a sudden against Cincinnati, the game gets away from them in the third quarter. They would love to have James Robinson carry 25 times a game, but you have to stay in it. It's up to the defense to allow the Jaguars to keep James Robinson in this game. Somehow.
Somehow, some way.
Log was the fact that I would assume that we all understood that the Jaguars had to put themselves in a position of keeping the game close so they could play that way.
There you go. Now we're talking. All right, we go back to you, Brian. Do your job. We say it all the time, but especially this week. Post-game, you don't want to hear Avery Jones or Joe Schobert talking about someone not in their right gap, miss assignments. Everyone has to be on their P's and Q's this week with a guy like Deshaun Watson.
Well, you just said it. And the reason that I brought it up was that it's very difficult with as many young players trying to absorb the game plan. You're going to move people into different positions. So no matter what, even taking Trey Herndon to a spot at nickel where he's played before, it isn't as if you just get back on the bicycle in some of these cases, right? You're analyzing your job in your defense against their offense and their tendencies. You're going to have some mistakes, and you have to minimize those against Deshaun Watson, because even if he's not as efficient throwing the ball at this point in the season with new receivers and a new scheme, he will find a hole in your defense and run through it if he has to. So whoever is playing in the secondary, however it's remade with the injuries it's sustained, you got to minimize those mistakes.
Could not agree more. All right, we touch on big thing 3, John Oehser, this turnover ratio. Wouldn't it be nice if the Jaguars defense could come up with 1, maybe 2, and say, here you go, Minshew, here's an extra chance. Go score.
They came up with 1 last week, but it was a touchdown preventing interception, which I'm not taking away from. It was important. But Miles Jack prevented the touchdown last week. What you would also love to see is a turnover happen in positive territory for the Jaguars. So they have a short field, and it creates that. They really haven't had that sort of momentum burst. I think it's 3 turnovers they've created this year, 2 of them against the Colts, and you won that game. The biggest thing about turnovers is sometimes when people are analyzing it, they forget that turnovers aren't really luck. They happen because your defense has created opportunities for turnovers. You've got to get teams in 3rd and long. You've got to get ahead. You have to create your own luck in that sense. That's why the turnovers haven't been happening so far. But yes, create a turnover. I don't think the Jaguars win anymore this season, frankly, unless they're a positive turnover ratio. They need that advantage.
Absolutely, and there are 3 key previews for a Houston Texans game on Sunday, a divisional matchup. All kinds of things going on in Houston. Jaguars looking for their 2nd win on the season.